welcome to the Icons with Rick Horrow. This month we're at the PGA National, home of the Honda Classic and 5 legendary golf courses. This month on the Icons, we sit down with tennis legend Butch Buchholz, one of the sport's top players in the late 1950s and 60s. Let's get started by going inside the icon. Butch Buchholz was born in St. Louis in 1940 and started playing in tennis tournaments at the age of 6. He was the first player in history to win the Grand Slam of junior tennis, winning titles at the Australian, French, Wimbledon, and the U.S. Junior title. Buchholz was ranked the number 5 amateur tennis player in the world in 1960. He played for the U.S. in the Davis Cup in 1959 and 1960 and turned pro in 1961. Buchholz was an original member of Lamar Hunt's Handsome Eight, a group of players signed in 1968 for the newly formed World Championship Tennis League. His post-playing career was equally as successful. Buchholz has served as the Commissioner of World Team Tennis, Executive Director of the ATP, and he founded the event now known as the Miami Masters in 1985. Buchholz was inducted into the International Tennis Hall of Fame in 2005. So, Butch, it is absolutely an honor. I believe that you are the only human being that I've ever met that has been so successful transcending both golf and tennis. And I appreciate you being here at the home of the Honda Classic to talk about both sports.
Well, pleasure to be here. I love both sports. And as I got older, my golf became a little bit more dominant than the tennis.
Well, before we even talk about that, so you shoot your age, under your age, on a regular basis now and are excited about it.
Yeah, I actually have quit counting.
Well, no, you haven't, because you've taken money from me a lot, so you know that you know when to count and when you don't. So you really started playing competitive tennis in tournaments, I'm told, at age 6.
Yes.
What developed your love of tennis at such a young age?
My dad was a teaching pro, and I think he wanted his son to not necessarily become a pro tennis player, because that really, in the early 40s, that wasn't such a big deal. But he saw tennis as an avenue to improve our life and our lifestyle. And I can't tell you the first time I hit a tennis ball, but I did. I played in the 15 under of St. Louis, and I was 6. I won the 13 and under when I was 7. I think I won the 15 under when I was 9. I won the Missouri Valley men's. I was 15.
See, ladies and gentlemen, there's a way to present that when you're really arrogant, or you can present it factually. The man just presented it factually. That's great. At a young age, though, you won the U.S. Junior, the French Open, the Australian Open, and Wimbledon at the junior class. When did you know, I guess at an early age, when did you know you were going to be really good? Did that add to the pressure? And, compare that to the pressure that young kids are experiencing today.
I think the kids probably have more pressure today. When we were growing up and in my junior years, I never thought I was going to make any money out of playing tennis. Pro tennis wasn't that big. So I think maybe the Connors generation, the Ash generation, those kids maybe when they were 17 or 18 said, yeah, I can turn pro and I can make a living. When we're hitting balls against the wall, when we're 12, 15, 13 years old, there was no thought of money. So I think that the feeling was that if you won Wimbledon or won a Grand Slam, that you could get a job in the as a stockbroker, or you'd be selling insurance, but you probably don't want to go and be a teaching pro someplace.
But so in 60, you turned pro.
Yeah.
And explain to people who really don't understand that history what the open era meant, your involvement in turning pro, and why it was so difficult during that time.
Rick, to look back, if I knew that it was going to take 8 years for open tennis to come in, I would not have turned pro when I did. But I turned pro because the history was that when the amateur turned pro, played against the pros, he got killed. So I said, I'm going to take my licks, and by the time I'm 23, I will have hopefully gone through the transition of an amateur player to a pro player and be competitive. I missed it by 8 years. And again, I thought that open tennis was just around the corner. I think in 60 it missed by 2 or 3 votes in '61 and missed by 5 votes. So the strategy I don't think was wrong. It was just I was a little late.
Well, we'll talk about Lamar and others in a minute, but so tell the Herman David Wimbledon chairman story in '67 and why that was so cool.
The chairman of Wimbledon really felt that the best players were not playing at Wimbledon. So he invited 8 of us to play in August.
Some of the 8?
Gonzalez, Hode, Rosewall, Laver, Fred Stolle, Andres Jimeno, Butch Buchholz. I don't think I'm missing anybody.
Big guys and Buchholz.
Yes, yeah. Bigger names, for sure. It said if you guys fill, this was in August, it was not the regular Wimbledon time. If you fill this stadium, that tells me that the British public still want to see you guys play. Rick, it was a huge success. I mean, it was the first time that BBC had done a sport in color, and we filled the the center court, and he came in the locker room at the end of the tournament and said, you guys are all invited to play here next year. And in those days, there wasn't a computer. It was all done by invitation. And 1968, we all played there.
That's probably one of the best, and the Barnstormers are a lot of stories that chronicle this, but for the general audience, it's effectively the birth of big league tennis as we know it today.
Absolutely. And it's surprising how many people think tennis has always been the way it is right now.
Yeah.
But in 1968, when it became open, that was the beginning of what you see as the tennis world today.
And Lamar Hunt of Kansas City Chiefs, Dallas Texans fame, but so much more, played a major role in this whole process. Talk about that.
Very much so. I think, tennis was sort of a promoter like Jack Kramer, who also was a great tennis player. He would put the tours on. We were playing one-night stands, and that was kind of pro tennis. And Lamar, after 1968, when he became the World Championship tennis, started tours where we had there was a tennis office. They ran it like a business, and it was different. I mean, it was great. And WCT, I think, really helped elevate the sport from basically an amateur way to a professional way. Arthur and I played the last game of golf that he played, and just a really good friend and a really good guy.
Arthur Ashe. You didn't totally correspond. There was a bit of an age difference there, but you got to know and play around and play with a little bit the legend. So talk about him.
Well, Arthur came to St. Louis, where I grew up, and played his senior year of high school in a place called the Armory, where we could play in St. Louis on a year-round basis, which is really what helped all the kids that came out of St. Louis for that 50s and 60s period, because we had the Armory and we could play. So Dr. Hudlin, who's the principal of Sumner High School, had Arthur come to live with him, but he could play. I think already turned pro, but he was playing with guys like Chuck McKinley and my brother and that whole generation, a few years younger than me. And then I became the head of the ATP, which Arthur supported, and we became friends, and I was on the Men's Pro Council with him for like 3 years. Arthur and I played the last game of golf that he played, and just a really good friend and a really good guy.
What made him special?
If you ask Arthur what he was, he said, I have a big serve, I've got a really good backhand, fair forehand, and I don't move that well. That was...
So his humility, basically,
was
right?
Just, I mean, he really cared about pro tennis. I mean, he had strong views on the player side. He was on the player board for many years, and a visionary. He could tell that the sport was growing and was it going in the right direction, and he very much supported that and helped build that.
Now, you personally had the good judgment, and I've seen you in other levels of athletic mediocrity, and you decided to do the right thing. So you at 29 decided to retire, but it's not really retire. I'm going to change the face of tennis. I'm going to be a commentator, I'm going to be a promoter, I'm going to be the Junior Davis Cup captain and all. And you founded basically the Players Association. So a lot to bite off at 29 years old.
Well, to be honest with you, Rick, when I stopped,
Yeah.
I got to tell you, I was scared. I had just hurt my elbow, and I really wasn't sure I was going to play again. I had just bought this big house. I had a wife, 3 kids, not a formal education, and so I really wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I was lucky that I got involved in building an indoor tennis facility in St. Louis, and we had a camp, and then I got involved with Sports Illustrated, and we managed the Rock Resort tennis complexes at Mauna Kea, Little Dix, Canal Bay, Dorado Beach there. So I got I cut my teeth in those businesses, and then I was asked to be the commissioner of World Team Tennis, which was a great experience for me, and met with people like Jerry Buss, who ended up owning the Lakers, Bobby Kraft, who owns the New England Patriots,
Billie Jean King.
And Billie Jean King.
Yeah.
And did that for a couple years, and the league actually folded because we couldn't get any female players to play, because the women's tour had basically taken off. And right after that, Arthur and Stan Smith were guys that pushed for me to become the head of the ATP. The other tournament directors were very anti that we were doing men's and women's together. And they felt that we should have the women play one week and the men play the next week. And I said, no, I think people want to go see Roger and Serena.
Well, so it's the 80s. You're the executive director of the ATP, but you always wanted to pursue your own tennis tournament here in Florida. You know, growing up in Florida and doing a lot of that stuff on the sports side and the arena side, it's impossible. Don't do it. But you did it. And so let's talk about that a little bit.
Well, I did have a background in doing the tournament because I was the tournament director for the WCT in St. Louis from I want to say 68, 69 almost until I started with the ATP. So I understood selling boxes, selling sponsorship, selling tickets. I understood that. In fact, you couldn't do this today, but one year I played in the tournament, I sold the sponsorships, I was the tournament referee, and I did the television.
What kind of draw did you give yourself? Pretty good draw?
Pretty good draw.
Of course.
I never got past the first round. Actually, I was basically retired by then. But so I had an experience in doing tournaments, and I also felt, going back to the 60s when we were not allowed to play major events, that someday the players should have their own championship, much like the Players' Championship at TPC, which what golf had done.
Yeah.
And actually, I'd spent a little time with Dean Beeman, and he was telling me what he was trying to accomplish, which he did. And I was fortunate that I got 2 weeks on the calendar through the Men's Pro Council, and felt that this is the direction that the association should go. I left that position and said, those 2 weeks, guys, I would like to. I'll build the sponsor. I'll find the sponsor. I'll build the stadium, and I'd like to have the rights to those. So I had the rights for 15 years, and then tennis politics, being what it is, changed, and the tour decides that they're going to take over and run all the tournaments with the tournament directors, and so I felt that, they felt that it was a conflict of interest. So the tour came and said, both tours said, Butch, if you and your brother want to take this over, you can, but the prize money is going up 40%, this, and this. And we said, okay, we'll do it, we'll take it. Yeah. And it worked,
Not only did it work, but you decided against all odds to build a stadium in Key Biscayne, Florida, where, by the way, it's incredibly difficult to do, if not impossible. I remember you honored me by being one of your first VIP guys for the Delray tournament starting in '85. And you decided you didn't have a big budget then, because rather than give us a coat, which you normally should, you gave us a little bit of one of the little cloth things, said put it on the coat and nobody will know it. But you came a long way since '85 in a market that was dominated by other sports. You need to be proud of it. But alas, all things kind of come to an end. Now that event is at Hard Rock in a stadium that's not built for tennis.
Right. Well, hopefully it's a temporary situation, and that between IMG and the Dolphins, that they will think long term and figure out how they're going to do that. I think the location is actually a plus, in that you can basically draw all the way up to Palm Beach, and so the market's getting much bigger. The grounds, I was just there Sunday, they're absolutely beautiful, and they just need to solve what they're going to do long term.
The beauty of your tournament, in addition to everything else you did, was the men and women playing together, which is there are only a couple of times in the U.S. and other than the majors, and so that seems to separate the little tournaments from the big tournaments. How difficult was that to pull off?
That was very difficult, and particularly the other tournament directors were very anti that we were doing men's and women's together. And they felt that we should have the women play one week and the men play the next week. And I said, no, I think people want to go see Roger and Serena at the same time. And it worked for the Grand Slams. Why shouldn't this work? Well, Rick, I tell you, politically, they tried to take the tournament away. There's all sorts of things that happened. But today, Rome, Madrid, Cincinnati, Indian Wells, Canada are all combined events, because they saw what happened at Key Biscayne, and it makes sense. And that product is, I think, men and women is the best thing for our sport.
More with Butch in a minute, including a look at more of his philanthropic work. But first, let's go inside the incredible philanthropy being done around the globe by U.S. Polo ASSN. In addition to being the fifth largest sports licensor in the world, U.S. Polo ASSN was established with the very purpose of sustaining and supporting the sport of polo in their charter. The philanthropy that is part of the brand is widespread and worldwide, starting with the U.S. Open Women's Polo Championship, benefiting Susan G. Komen. Breast cancer, obviously, a very important focus of your organization, as well as taking this international. So talk about both of those themes.
Yeah, we talked about the importance that women have on the sport, and can't stress that enough. And that's not just in the United States; it's around the world. And so one of the things that we realized as a brand, like, let's get behind some of these female causes, such as breast cancer awareness, and let's get behind some of the events, not only in the U.S., but also abroad. And so the Susan G. Komen, great organization, huge presence in South Florida. We get behind that event. We create pink shirts that we hand out, we give away, we wear. A lot of women's events that we get behind.
And you got the Santabel ISPS Handa Pro Cup in South Africa, a bit of a different cause, but again, it's international.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, I look at the brand as 180 countries worldwide, millions of consumers worldwide. And so we were approached for two different charity events, working with Prince Harry, the Duke of Sussex, and Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge. Great young men making a huge difference in the world. And they have different charities and causes that they get behind. We got behind it. We're title sponsors for a couple of the events, do the jerseys and all that. And what we love about it is that you're once again giving back to charities through the brand and through the sport of polo. And it's so authentic for us, and it just makes you feel good. We'll always look at opportunities around the world where somebody has a polo opportunity that may have a philanthropic cause. I know it makes us feel good. It makes a difference in the time we're living through right now. There's a lot of unprecedented challenges in the world, and it's never mattered so much as it does today, giving back and helping others.
So let's transition for a minute. Being the true icon you were, you never know when to stop. So you have a huge success with the tennis tournament. And then some people say, it's going to be easy, take over Doral and make millions out of that event. Why'd you do that?
I got a phone call, look at my phone, and it's PGA Tour. So why would the PGA Tour be calling a tennis guy? And then I remember I was a member at TPC. So I'm thinking, I bet I haven't paid my bill. I thought they were trying to get... No, Butch, we actually would like to talk to you about joining the team and try to get the community involved, which is, I think we did a good job on the tennis side. And we did, we increased the revenue substantially, got Joe Stone Crabs involved and Schulerbergers, and built these great champagne areas. And so I wanted to bring Miami to the golf event. And at the time they were doing hamburgers and hot dogs, and that's not Miami. So I enjoyed it. I had a good time. I enjoyed working with the tour. They're very professional. Unfortunately, the tournament left and went to Mexico because they had a hard time finding a sponsor to replace Cadillac. And Cadillac told us a year in advance, so it wasn't like a surprise. They were changing their whole marketing.
Well, we all understand sponsorship is key to all of these sports. So your unique perspective again, as we started, compare we already know the answer to this, but compare the governing structure of tennis and golf, and knowing what your answer is going to be, how do you improve the governing structure of tennis?
If I could play tennis god for one day,
yeah,
I would put all of tennis under one roof. That doesn't mean they're going to lose their identity, but you're going to have a WTA office, an ATP office, you're going to have the ITF, you're going to have Slam, so that when decisions are made, like the French made a decision they were just going to change the date, they didn't ask anybody, they just went and changed it. Well, tennis world erupts. If you could walk down the hall and talk to the ATP and WTA and say, this is what I'm thinking about,
yeah,
you just saved all that anguish.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and for business people, it would be a lot easier for say, hey, you know what, I think tennis would be something that would really help my product and would be a good association. Where does he go? You know, I go to ITF or Davis Cup, I can go to ATP, WTA, Grand Slams, where if there was an office for tennis, and then he could decide what he wanted to do. Now you remember, the difference between the golf and tennis is that the tennis people are entrepreneurs. They own their event.
That's a good point.
And for golf, you come and do the Honda tournament, well, the tour gives them a license to run that tournament, and it's all about charity, where in professional tennis, it's not. So there's a big difference in you know, the business side of it. I think the fact that open tennis happened, and then we fought so hard.
You know what? He's an inspiration, however. You're an inspiration to me, and you're an inspiration because I can call you a good friend. And an inspiration because, ladies and gentlemen, my final comment is he still owes me $5. Thank you very much.
I'm slow to pay.
Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time on The Icons.